Elvis Presley didn't just make music. He became a symbol so large that even now, decades after his death, the world is still arguing about what he meant. Marilyn Monroe built a persona so powerful it consumed everything around it, including her. Whitney Houston had a voice that could fill any room on earth. She also had a life the world felt entitled to own. Bob Marley turned struggle into something that outlasted him. His name is a brand now. His face is on a million walls. The man behind it is harder to see. Freddie Mercury performed like he was trying to outrun something. Maybe he was. The spectacle was real. So was the cost. Amy Winehouse. Extraordinary talent. A public life that became impossible to separate from a private one that was falling apart. Kobe Bryant willed himself into legend through discipline so extreme it alienated people who loved him. He said the obsession was worth it. Only he knew what it actually cost. Picture Atlantic City, 1990. The Taj Mahal Casino has just opened its doors, billed as the eighth wonder of the world, a billion-dollar monument to excess and ambition sitting on the Jersey Shore. Inside, the chandeliers are enormous, the carpets are loud, and Donald Trump is everywhere. On the signage, in the advertising, on the television screens in the lobby. He is 43 years old. His name is synonymous with gold, and the building is already bleeding money faster than the slot machines can swallow quarters. That tension, the spectacle versus the reality underneath it, is the story of Donald Trump. Not just the businessman, not just the politician, not just the television personality. The story of a man who built his entire public existence on the idea that perception is reality, and then spent decades discovering how costly that philosophy could be. He was born in Queens, New York, in June 1946, the fourth of 5 children. Not Manhattan, Queens. That distinction matters more than it might seem, because everything Trump has done since has been a negotiation with Manhattan, with the idea of belonging to a place that looked down on where he came from. His father, Fred Trump, was a builder of affordable housing in Brooklyn and Queens. Successful, disciplined, demanding, and not particularly warm. Fred ran a tight operation. He brought young Donald to construction sites as a child. He deposited him in the New York Military Academy at age 13, partly because the boy was becoming difficult to manage. Structure, Fred believed, was the answer. What came out of that military school was someone who had absorbed the lesson of dominance, the idea that every room had a hierarchy and the only acceptable position was the top. Trump transferred to the Wharton School of Finance at the University of Pennsylvania, graduated in 1968, and went to work in his father's company. He was good at it. More than that, he was magnetic. He could sell the idea of something before the something existed. That is a specific and rare skill, and in real estate, it is nearly the whole game. He wanted Manhattan. He got it. In 1976, he brokered a deal to redevelop the Commodore Hotel near Grand Central Terminal, partnering with Hyatt and using tax abatements from a city that was essentially bankrupt and desperate for investment. The hotel reopened as the Grand Hyatt in 1980. It was his first major Manhattan project, and it announced him. Here was a kid from Queens who had figured out how to make the city work for him. Trump Tower followed, finished in 1983, rising 58 stories above Fifth Avenue, clad in bronze glass with a pink marble atrium inside and a waterfall that cascaded 5 stories down the wall. It was not subtle. It was not meant to be. Trump moved into a triplex penthouse on the upper floors, a space decorated in gold leaf and marble that looked like a French palace had been filtered through a Las Vegas imagination. He lived there. He entertained there. He made sure every journalist who came to interview him saw it. The apartment was the argument. The apartment said, "I won." Through the 80s, the brand expanded in every direction. Trump Plaza, Trump Park. The Plaza Hotel, purchased in 1988 for $407 million. The Trump Shuttle Airline. The casinos in Atlantic City. The Trump Plaza, Trump's Castle, and then the Taj Mahal, which opened in April 1990 and was financed with nearly $1 billion in junk bonds carrying a 14% interest rate. That number is worth sitting with, 14%, on $945 million. The math was brutal from the start, and yet the image held. In 1987, Trump published The Art of the Deal, written with journalist Tony Schwartz. It became one of the best-selling business books in American history. In it, Trump articulated what he called truthful hyperbole, a phrase that is either a confession or a philosophy, depending on how generously you read it. The book argued that thinking big, projecting confidence, and controlling your own narrative were the core skills of deal-making. Millions of readers took it as a business Bible. What the book did not dwell on was the gap between the projected confidence and the financial position underneath it. By 1990, that gap had become a canyon. The Taj Mahal's debt was crushing. The Trump Shuttle was hemorrhaging cash. The Plaza Hotel was over-leveraged. Trump's personal debt was reported at around $900 million. His businesses filed for bankruptcy protection, not once, but multiple times across the early 90s, restructuring casino debt and renegotiating with banks who had, by that point, concluded that they were too exposed to let him fully collapse. It was a cold and humbling calculation on both sides. The banks needed him to keep operating because the alternative, liquidation, would cost them more. He survived it. That is the factual record. He survived it through a combination of negotiation, brand resilience, and a willingness to keep projecting confidence even when the ground was disappearing beneath him. Whether that is admirable fortitude or a cautionary tale about the cost of leverage is a question different people answer differently, and Trump himself has answered it by pointing only to the survival. The 90s were a strange decade for him. The tabloids were brutal. His marriage to Ivana Trump, mother of his first 3 children, Donald Jr., Ivanka, and Eric, had collapsed publicly and messily in 1990, with the press covering every detail of his relationship with Marla Maples. He married Maples in 1993. They had a daughter, Tiffany, and divorced in 1999. Through all of it, he remained a fixture of New York celebrity culture, not always in a flattering light, but present, quotable, impossible to ignore. The name stayed alive. In the gossip columns, in the business press, in the tabloids, in the culture. Being talked about, even badly, was preferable to silence. That, too, was a philosophy. The rebuilding happened quietly, and then suddenly. By the late 90s, several Trump properties were generating real revenue. He licensed his name, a crucial shift. Instead of owning and financing everything himself, he discovered that the name alone had monetary value. Developers would pay to put Trump on their building. The asset was no longer just the real estate. The asset was the identity. Then, in 2004, came The Apprentice. It is difficult to overstate what that television show did to the public understanding of Donald Trump. 16 seasons, tens of millions of viewers at its peak. The premise was simple. Contestants competed for a job in the Trump organization, and each week, someone was fired. Trump sat at the head of a boardroom table, flanked by his children and associates, and delivered the verdict. He was authoritative. He was decisive. He was, in the edited reality of network television, exactly the businessman the brand had always claimed he was. The phrase, "You're fired," entered the cultural vocabulary. Trump won an Emmy nomination. The show transformed him from a New York tabloid figure into a genuine national celebrity. And it did something more specific. It gave tens of millions of Americans a fixed image of who Donald Trump was. The boardroom, the power, the certainty. That image would prove extraordinarily durable. In 2005, he married Melania Knaus, a Slovenian model he had met at a party in 1998. Their son Baron was born in 2006. By this point, the Trump world had expanded into golf courses, hotels, a modeling agency, a fragrance line, and Trump University, a for-profit education venture that would later face lawsuits from students who alleged it failed to deliver on its promises, ultimately resulting in a $25 million settlement in 2016, with no admission of wrongdoing. But none of that is what changed American history. In June 2015, Donald Trump descended an escalator at Trump Tower and announced he was running for president of the United States. The political class, by and large, did not take it seriously. The press treated it as a spectacle. His polling numbers were low. He had made noises about running before, in 1988, in 2000, in 2012, without following through. This time was supposed to be more of the same. It was not. What followed was one of the most disorienting campaigns in modern American political history. Trump ignored the norms that had governed political behavior for generations. The careful language, the deference to party structures, the managed messaging. He insulted opponents directly and by name. He held rallies that felt more like entertainment events than political gatherings. He generated constant media attention, so much that analysts later calculated he received billions of dollars worth of free airtime simply by being impossible to look away from. The same force that had kept his name alive through the tabloid years, the refusal to be ignored, turned out to be a powerful political tool. He won the Republican primary. He defeated 16 other candidates, several of them experienced politicians with deep party backing. He then defeated Hillary Clinton in the general election on November 8, 2016, winning the Electoral College while losing the popular vote. He was inaugurated as the 45th President of the United States on January 20, 2017. The presidency was as turbulent as everything that had preceded it. He pursued significant tax reform, which passed in December 2017, cutting the corporate tax rate substantially. He reshaped the federal judiciary, appointing 3 Supreme Court justices, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett, a legacy that will shape American law for decades, regardless of how one views his politics. He renegotiated trade relationships, withdrew from international agreements, and pursued a foreign policy that consistently defied the expectations of both parties. He was also impeached twice. The first impeachment, in 2019, centered on his dealings with Ukraine. The second, in January 2021, following the events of January 6th at the United States Capitol, charged him with incitement of insurrection. He was acquitted by the Senate both times. January 6th remains one of the most contested and consequential days in recent American history, with ongoing legal and political debates about responsibility and consequence that have not been fully resolved. He lost the 2020 presidential election to Joe Biden. He disputed the result publicly and persistently, making claims of widespread fraud that courts, including judges he had appointed, consistently rejected. The period between November 2020 and January 2021 was among the most chaotic of his public life, and its legal aftermath followed him out of office. What followed was something almost no political figure has ever attempted: a return. Facing multiple criminal indictments in federal and state courts, cases involving classified documents, efforts to overturn the 2020 election results in Georgia, and a New York case involving business records, Trump ran for president again. He secured the Republican nomination for 2024, while simultaneously navigating unprecedented legal territory. In May 2024, he became the first former American president to be convicted of felony crimes, found guilty on 34 counts in the New York case. And then, in November 2024, he won the presidential election again, defeating Kamala Harris and returning to the White House as the 47th President of the United States. It is a sequence of events that has no real precedent in American political history. Conviction, then election, then inauguration. Whatever one's political position, the sheer improbability of that arc demands attention. What drives it? That is the question that journalists, historians, supporters, and opponents have been arguing over for a decade without consensus. His supporters point to a genuine populist energy, a sense that he speaks directly to people who feel ignored by institutions, that he fights rather than capitulates, that he represents something real against a political class that had become insulated and self-serving. His critics point to the bankruptcies, the lawsuits, the norm-breaking, the rhetoric, and ask what the real cost of this particular brand of performance has been: on democratic institutions, on political culture, on the people around him. Both of those arguments are happening simultaneously, in real time, because the story is not over. The discipline behind the image is something that often gets lost in the noise. Trump does not drink alcohol. He has maintained that fact throughout his public life, a discipline he has attributed to watching his older brother Freddie struggle with alcoholism. Freddie died in 1981, and Trump has spoken about that loss as formative in ways that are rarely centered in the public conversation about him. He sleeps, by his own account, very few hours. He has maintained a physical presence and a media presence with a consistency that is exhausting to observe and presumably more exhausting to sustain. Whatever the critics say about him, the work rate is not an invention. The cost is harder to measure. What does it cost to maintain an identity that is entirely public, entirely branded, entirely projected? His children grew up in that projection. His marriages existed inside it. His business failures were absorbed by it. His legal battles have unfolded inside it. The man who descended that escalator in 2015 understood something that took the political world years to fully process. The brand was not separate from the person. The brand was the strategy. The image was the weapon. The question of what lives inside the image, the private fears, the genuine convictions, the actual human being, is one that Trump himself has never seemed particularly interested in answering in public, and perhaps that refusal is itself the answer. He is, in his late 70s, serving his second term as president, still fighting, still litigating, still generating the same polarized response he has generated for 40 years. The Taj Mahal is gone now. It closed in 2016, demolished in 2021. The building that was supposed to be the eighth wonder of the world lasted less than 3 decades. The man who put his name on it is still standing. Whether that is the point of the story or the irony of it probably depends on which side of the argument you are already on. That is the nature of Donald Trump. He does not resolve. He continues.